You are watching Tech and AI Live. Now we've got a great presentation coming up with Domhnaill Hernon, Director of Innovation and Creativity at EY. His presentation is titled Enhancing Human Creativity with Technology. Domhnaill is an award-winning technology innovation and creativity executive. He received an undergrad in aeronautical engineering and a PhD in aerodynamics from the University of Limerick and an executive MBA from Dublin City University in Ireland. Domhnaill is the global lead and co-founder of a new initiative at EY to create the cognitive human enterprise. Domhnaill's work has been featured in Wired magazine, Times Square, TEDx, and Inspire Fest, to name just a few, and he advises innovation and cultural programs globally. So welcome, Domhnaill. It's great to have you here.
Hey everyone, great to be here with you and giving us the opportunity to share some of the work we're doing in the topic of enhancing human creativity with technology. So
Great.
Let's launch in.
Definitely.
So, one of the things I'd like for people to take away from this, and I'm going to give lots of examples and give different ways of thinking through this, but if there was one quote or thought I'd like you to walk away with in this talk, it's around, this is something that I say to folks: in the age of digital automation, human creativity is the only differentiator. So if you're in business, if you're in R&D, if you're in creativity, you have to understand that it's the human creativity angle that's going to provide all of the differentiation. That's how you gain market share. That's how you win in the market. That's how you can get ahead of your competitors. This is becoming ever more increasingly the big differentiator and a way that firms are investing in their people in lots of different ways. So this is the key takeaway that I'd like you to take from the talk. Now, to explain what I mean by that and why I feel so strongly about that, we can think of this concept called humans times machines. And what I mean by that is, today there's a false narrative that in the future there'll be a battle between humans and machines. And in the media and in the press, there's often this philosophy that there's this existential threat that exists between machines taking over all of our jobs, machines taking over all of our creativity, machines becoming more intelligent than humans. And really, in my view, that's a false narrative. And that false narrative stems from a deep lack of understanding about the fundamental underpinning technology. To what extent are machines intelligent? To what extent are machines creative? And to what extent, or what's the time frame that they may or may not be able to supplant or supersede humans in some things or in all things? So these are really big questions, and I want to give you some ways of thinking about this that might kind of ground your thinking in a different place, to remove some of that fear that you might be reading about and gaining fear from all of this misinformation in the popular media. So to start off, there's kind of two competing philosophies in technology. A predominant philosophy that gets written about in the popular media and the press quite a lot is around machines and algorithms and technology replacing, superseding, supplanting humans, becoming more intelligent and more creative than humans. And that drives a lot of fear, obviously, because if you think you're going to lose your job, you're going to lose your livelihood to a machine or an algorithm, of course, you can't but be fearful of that. Now, there's a totally different philosophy, a philosophy that I adhere to and that we invest in the work we do, which is this philosophy of humans times machines. So how do we take the best of humanity, put it together with the best of technology, and how is the combination of both of those things far more than either on their own? And I'm going to give you lots of ways to think through this and some examples of the work we are doing, especially with the artistic community, to drive and prove the value of this philosophy of humans times machines instead of humans versus machines. In my view, there is no battle. There should be no battle if we design the technology the right way from day one. So I'm going to talk a little bit about human intelligence and creativity versus machine intelligence or artificial intelligence and creativity. So just straight off the bat, just FYI, just so you know, machines and algorithms know nothing, right? If you read anyone that says other than that, it's just actually not correct. They have no understanding, they have no intelligence, they have no wisdom. And if an entity doesn't have any of those things, how can it possibly be creative? Okay, so why do I say that? Algorithms and technology, machine learning algorithms, artificial intelligence, today they leverage memory recall, they leverage intense computational capability in big server farms, big machines and computers and GPUs and CPUs, and they leverage probabilities. And they make guesses within extremely confined limitations of what they are taught. In other words, there's a set of data that represents something in the world. The algorithms are fed lots and lots and lots of that very specific data. After a long period of time and a lot of training, the algorithms can do a good job predicting new things out of that data. But if you give that algorithm a different set of data, even only slightly different, that it hasn't been trained on, the algorithm will be completely incorrect, will make mistakes. So if you think about that, that's very different to human intelligence. I can learn things as a human and then I can extrapolate out and make good guesses beyond what I've been taught, whereas the machine can only make good guesses based on the very limited data on that particular area it's been given. And here's a picture on the right about how a machine learns. It's all through what are called neural nets and deep neural nets and things like that. But just to let you know, this whole model of machine learning is based on an understanding of the human brain from about 70 years ago. So about 70 years ago, people started conceptualizing this idea of artificial intelligence or machine intelligence, and they started trying to replicate how they believed human intelligence came about in the brain. 70 years ago, as you can imagine, they had an extremely limited knowledge about human intelligence in the brain. I mean, we didn't even have MRI technology to scan into the brain to understand the brain at any level. So they built all these models about artificial intelligence based on an incorrect model of human intelligence in the brain. But the problem is this concept of artificial intelligence in this model has persisted today because of the mathematics of it. And it leads to a lot of misunderstanding. It leads to a lot of fear, mainly because of the use of this word intelligence, which is deeply linked to something that's human. So there's this misconception, if we were to take this a step further, go beyond just the algorithms and the 70-year-old understanding of the brain, there's this misconception that human intelligence resides in the brain. Now, this might be kind of shocking to a lot of people because we as humans associate our intelligence to be something that happens in the brain. But actual fact, let's work through a thought experiment together. So I asked the question, what value would the human brain have if it was not connected to the body? So let's just say theoretically we could remove the brain and keep it alive but completely detached from the rest of the body. What would the brain do? What would its functionality be? Now, the interesting thing is the brain is just a pattern recognition engine. But what are those patterns that it recognizes? Those patterns come from your body. You have your eyes, your smell, your fingers, your touch. You have all these senses that are connected to your body. And the brain takes in all those patterns from all over your body, ingests those patterns into the brain and runs its own algorithms on all those patterns. And that's how it makes sense of the world. You build these world models based on this sensory input from all over your body. So if you could take the brain and remove it from the body, it would have zero functionality. It wouldn't have consciousness. It wouldn't have intelligence. It wouldn't have creativity, because the brain's existence and functionality completely depends on taking in all the information from the body and the world around it. Without that information, the brain has no data to do anything with, and therefore it has no purpose. So there is no human intelligence, consciousness, or creativity without the sensory input of the brain currently. Okay, that is just what it is. That's the way the brain functions. That's the way the body and the brain comes together to create us as humans. So now, if you think about this, this is quite interesting, that how can an algorithm which is fed data in a very limited way, which runs these mathematical procedures on the data in a limited way, how could that possibly be the same as human intelligence or creativity, when we clearly have a different types of intelligence and creativity based on our connection to the human body? So let's take this a step further. So humans have 9 different types of intelligence. Humans have 9 different ways of thinking. Let's ask the question, how many different types of intelligence or different ways of thinking does a machine have? Right? I don't have an answer to that actually, but it's a much lower number than we humans have, I can guarantee that. How can a machine be creative like us humans if the machine does not have all these intelligences and all these different types of thinking? Now I could take that even a step further. Machines learn based on a limited set of data, as I mentioned. Us humans learn based on our lived experience. Like, we go through life over periods of decades if we're lucky. We engage with the world around us, other people, our sensory input, with the physical environment, and we learn very quickly and over a period of time throughout our lived experience. That's what informs our creativity and our intelligence. The machine does not have a lived experience. The machine does not live. The machine only knows that limited set of data. So again, if we were to compare human intelligence and creativity to that of a machine or of artificial intelligence, you start seeing that there's real fundamental differences in the approach, and therefore they cannot be the same thing. So here's an example. Here's work we did with an artist. Harry Yeff is his name. Reaps One is his artistic name. He's a beatboxer, one of the best beatboxers that has ever lived. He is someone that a few years ago pushed his voice to the absolute extreme. No one has ever pushed their voice as far. He felt a few years ago that he had reached the absolute apex of his capability in his vocal experimentation. We started collaborating with Harry on a project that we wanted to show the capability of technology to enhance human potential, in particular, the capability of machine learning algorithms and artificial intelligence to enhance human creativity. And we wanted to use Harry as an example because him being the best in the world that has ever lived in experimenting and pushing the level of the voice and what the human voice can do, we felt that if we could give him some tools and techniques to be able to collaborate with through machine learning and artificial intelligence, we wanted to see how far we might be able to push his voice in a new direction. So we trained machine learning algorithms on Harry's beatboxing. We called that second self, which is like his AI digital beatboxing twin. And after a period of time, those algorithms reached a level of maturity where they started giving back sounds and techniques that really kind of sounded like him, but the algorithm started doing techniques and creating sounds in a way that Harry has never done in his life. From that, we gave him the ability to real-time live collaborate with his second self, these machine learning algorithms trained on his voice. And through that process of real-time live dynamic collaboration with this second self, he has, in his own words, leveled up his voice. He is performing differently, composing differently, creating new sounds and techniques that he never thought he would be able to do. And that is because we gave him this technological like alter ego that he was able to collaborate with, and that became a collaborator of his and a mentor of his and a battler of his. At times, like, he battles and tries to figure out how he can get more out of himself and more out of the machine and the algorithms in this exchange. So I'm going to play you a short clip of this. You can check it out online if you Google search Reaps One second self. You can see the full video. This is a video that kind of shares the exchange and the training process between Harry and his machine learning second self. But what's super interesting here is that we took one of the most creative people in the world, one of the best that has ever lived in his art form, and we were able to give him this technology that he could collaborate with, and that pushed his creativity to the next level. So my big question is to others in the work I do, and back to you, if we can help some of the most creative people in the world be more creative, can you imagine what we might do for the rest of humanity if we design this technology the right way? Okay, so just to summarize this part of the presentation, machine intelligence and creativity, I&C for short here, are not the same as human intelligence and creativity in my view. And again, I gave just a few small examples and a few thought experiments to help you kind of think through this, to wrap your mind around the fact that the brain without the sensory input from the body doesn't really do much. It has no functionality, and therefore human intelligence is so much more than just the algorithms that run in our brain. So in my view, machines may never surpass human intelligence and creativity, but they might become better than us in other non-human ways. And this is where they're being used in business and in different ways to automate things. So let's ask the question about the metaverse. I talked about machine learning and artificial intelligence a little bit. One of the biggest new hyped up emerging technologies of our time is the metaverse. For anyone that doesn't know, the metaverse is the evolution of the internet, where everything becomes three-dimensional, spatial, immersive, It can be deployed on augmented reality technology, on virtual reality technology. It can be deployed on the web of today. But the big shift here is that everything becomes 3D, spatial, and immersive. And then along with that comes other types of technological enablers that are called Web3 around decentralization and blockchain. I'm not going to go into any of that here, but let's start thinking about the metaverse and the capability to enhance human creativity and human potential by looking at this technology. So let's go back to one of our thought experiments. In the physical world today, in the biological human version of us that resides in the physical world, we have 5 primary sensors. In total, I think we have maybe 27 or more, but the primary ones that most people know about are the ones you see on the picture here. Now, in the virtual environment, we only use predominantly one of those senses. We use visual. It's all about visual. It's in virtual reality, it's all visual, a little bit of sound, but we under leverage the sound aspect in these virtual environments quite significantly in comparison to how we live in the real physical world. So we're very much dominated by one of the senses, and that sense kind of can take over 90% plus of your sensory input when you're in these metaverse environments. So think about this. We lose a substantial proportion of our overall human sensory experience when we're in these virtual environments or in these metaverse environments. And as I explained to you, what does that mean for human intelligence? If you believe me, that the human brain takes in all the sensory input from all of our different senses and then runs its own algorithms on top of that, and then that's what creates human intelligence, consciousness, and creativity. Now we have an interesting dilemma where we're going to force people into these virtual environments, these metaverse environments that will be very heavily dominated with one sense. And now you have to ask the question, well, what might happen to human intelligence and creativity in that environment? How do we need to be careful about this? Do we need to create new experiences? How do we understand this fundamentally, and how do we build the right solutions around this so that this doesn't do harm to humanity in the future? So let's give an example. This is one of the artists we're working with recently called Kate Mocktiger. Kate is an artist designer, and Kate is neurodiverse, so she is on the autistic spectrum disorder. And today, but especially when Kate was younger, she used to have a hypersensitivity to textures and colors in the physical world around her. And that hypersensitivity in time made her become hyper aware of some things around her in the physical world that those of us that are quote unquote neurotypical are completely oblivious to. So as I said, certain textures, certain colors that even here in my office around me today, I'm looking around, I'm not even paying attention to them because of Kate's lived experience and because of the way that she, in a sensorial way, experiences the world. She became hyper aware of these things. So later on in Kate's life, she learned to cope with that hypersensitivity, but she also entered into her creative practice, and she created these gigantic scale physical pop-ups where you would enter into this space and your brain would be confronted with new colors and new textures in these very fantastical ways. It would open up your mind to new experiences and new ways of seeing things. And then you would come out of these physical installations, and then you would come back into the normal world, and you would start being more aware of colors and textures and these kind of things around you. So that's what Kate's work is typically. And with Kate, we're working with Kate on our metaverse activities to build new 3-dimensional immersive virtual environments that tap into Kate's insights, Kate's lived experience, Kate's neurodiversity, so that we can think about new human experiences in the virtual, such that when you come out of these virtual environments, you now start being connected and become more aware of the physical environment around you. So a lot of the work we're doing currently in the metaverse and with our artistic collaborators is how do we put humans at the center, really deeply between the physical world of today and these new virtual worlds and virtual experiences in the metaverse, and how do we make sure that we understand the human condition, human psychology, biology, physiology, all of the different ologies. How do we understand deeply what it means to be human, and how do we understand what's important about humans in the physical world, and then what is different about humans in the virtual world, and how can we think about creating new experiences in the virtual to connect people in new and interesting ways. So this is a lot of the work. This is just a snapshot of a lot of the work we're doing with the artistic and creative community today in the metaverse, thinking about new ways to tap into human creativity, human intelligence, and how can we leverage this technology to bring that to a whole new level with people that we engage with in our customer base. So The work we're doing, so what's next? So we're making quite a substantial investment in what we call the cognitive human enterprise. And the idea here is that we want to create the most cognitively diverse teams and organizations in the world. And the way we do this in our work is that we massively invest in interdisciplinary collaboration, and we invest in full spectrum diversity. And when you bring people together with all these different lived experiences, different expertise, using different technologies in different ways, different cultural backgrounds, all of those differences come together to create what's called cognitive diversity. In other words, you now have the ability to tap into humanity's 9 different types of intelligence and 9 different ways of thinking. And I ask people today as a thought experiment, think about in your teams you work with in your organizations, how many of those intelligences or how many of those different ways of thinking do you have in your teams today? Most often people say maybe 2 or 3. So think about all of the innovation and creativity you're leaving on the table because you have not brought the right set of people together with all of that diversity of everything, full spectrum diversity that leads to cognitive diversity, will help you solve the world's biggest problems in new and interesting ways. And our particular unique selling point or differentiator in the work I do is that we bring artists deep into business, artists deep into technology, and we leverage their very unique human-centric way of thinking and combining technology with business and society in new and interesting ways to have humans at the center of these new technologies we're building out. So for anyone that's interested, if you want to do a screen grab here, I don't have time to go into it, but you might ask, like, why art and creativity and business and technology? And this is just a bit of a framing that I use to help people understand. I'm not going to go into it here, but take a screen grab. If you're interested, reach out to me on various social media platforms and I'll happily give you more information about this. And otherwise, what we're going to do is let's just wrap it up with some key takeaway thoughts, just to summarize what we're talking about. So in my view, machine intelligence and creativity is absolutely not the same as human intelligence and creativity. And I would say that the machine, quote unquote, or artificial intelligence only doesn't even come close to the level of human intelligence or creativity. And I think it's a very, very long time away before algorithms or machines even come close to the level of creativity and intelligence that us humans have, broadly speaking. In fact, I think intelligence is the wrong word for algorithms and machines, and it's an unfortunate word. I mean, I understand the history of it, but when you talk about intelligence, it's a deeply human thing. And now all of a sudden we have a battle between machines being quote unquote intelligence and human intelligence. And that's where a lot of fear comes from. And I'd actually like it if the word intelligence was removed from the discussion about technology completely, because I think it drives too much fear through lack of understanding. As I said, machines may never surpass human intelligence, but they are very, very good at doing some things, repetitive tasks at speed and at scale that humans are not very good at. And I truly believe that the future is humans times machines. So we take the best of humanity, pair it with the best of technology, and the combination of both of them is so much more than either on their own. And I have so many examples in the work we do where I can prove and show you the value of working in that way. And it's a very different philosophical approach to technology compared to a lot of the work that's happening in technology today. And in our view, to build a better working world, to ensure that technology companies and different businesses do good for society with humans at the center, we have to invest in the people and bring people from all walks of life together in new and interesting ways. And our particular approach to that is to fuse artists and creatives and bring them deep into technology and bring them deep into business. So with that, I'd like to wrap up. Appreciate your time, appreciate the opportunity to share some of this thinking and some of the work examples of the work we're doing with this community. And we would love to engage in some questions and a bit of dialogue and see if we can shed more light on some of these topics.
Thanks so much, Domhnaill. It was really, really interesting. And I do think we've got time to squeeze a couple of questions in, maybe not them all, but we have had some questions come in from the audience. So obviously there's been a lot of hype around the metaverse. I think a lot of people are getting excited about it. You see these really cool graphics of people with the VR headsets and things like that on. But what are your thoughts on the hype around it and the actual reality of the metaverse?
Yeah, so I think there's two. The way I answer this question is typically there's two important things that you need to. A lot of people talk about the metaverse, but there's also Web3, and people confuse the two things, and they're actually distinctly different. Now, what you need to understand is that the future of the evolution of the internet is definitely going to take place around some changes in the metaverse, which I would call your websites and your web interface become more 3D, more spatial, more immersive. And there's going to be changes that take place more on the back end, which are more what's called Web3 enabled, where things around decentralization and NFTs and all those kind of things. I'm not going to go into it in detail here, but there's absolutely a lot of hype around the 3D immersive side of things like AR and VR. And there's a lot of hype around the blockchain enabled NFT side of things. But back out of that hype, like once that hype cycle finishes, we're seeing a lot of really compelling use cases in different enterprise settings, in different sectors, in different industries, across the board, like supply chain, new business models, new ways to engage your consumers. And there's real use cases that are coming out just behind all of the hype. So I would be very careful I acknowledge there is hype, but I don't dismiss the technology because we're currently in a hype cycle. I truly believe that there's a lot of really serious, interesting, I would call them paradigm shifts that are about to take place in the next few years that are being enabled by some of this new technology, how people connect in new ways, how brands connect with consumers in new ways, how we give power back to the people in new ways. This is all around decentralization and concepts called DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. Won't get into it here because it's a bit of a, it's a kind of a very broad subject. But a lot of the shift that's happening is, how do we take some of the power away from big corporations? How do we give more control and ownership and power back to the people? How do we let the people decide how they want to monetize their own existence and how they engage in different technologies in different ways? So these are like mega shifts that are occurring in the Web3 side of things and on the metaverse side of things. So much hype at the moment, but like coming right behind the hype are really big changes in how businesses are going to have to go to market, connect with consumers, create value, generate revenue. And if you're not aware of those changes now, you're going to completely miss the opportunity, and someone else is going to come along and eat your lunch, eat into your market share, and get traction with your consumers in ways, and it'll be impossible for you to catch up because that's how quick things are moving.
No, definitely. I think that's a theme that comes from a lot of these. People need to be really aware of all these different technologies and where they all connect with each other, else you will just be competitively so behind. But sadly, that is all we have time for today. I think it's really interesting to kind of see how tech and creativity can intersect. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today, and thank you for taking the time for joining us.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. And thanks to the audience for watching. Make sure you stay tuned to check out the rest of our speakers for Tech and AI Live.